Good afternoon, and welcome to Georgia State University. My name is Jackie Lund, and I am the interim chair of the Kinesiology and Health Department. I have the honor of representing the KH department faculty today for today's inaugural Mike and Terry Distinguished Lecture. Before I say a few things about Mike and Terry, I want to express some thanks to those who have worked behind the scenes to make this event a huge success, as is evidenced by the great crowd here and the many who are viewing it on live streaming. I'd like to begin by thanking the KH Department's Research Committee, who was tasked with planning this lecture and the annual research symposium that will follow it today. The members of the committee are Dr. Jerry Brandon. Jerry, would you stand up wherever you are? Is he here? Okay. Dr. Jerry Wu. Jerry? And Dr. Rachel Gervich. All right. Thank you very much for your efforts. I'd also like to thank Dr. Mark Guile, the former chair of KH, who took the lead in arranging for Dr. Salas to be here today. I'm sure the committee and the Metzlers will agree that an extra special thank you goes to Angela Turk, the communications director in the College of Education and Human Development, who is largely responsible for the promotion and staging today. Angela, where are you? Thank you so much. You've been great. Other thanks go to Matt Munson from our Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning for making the live streaming possible, along with recording the lecture for viewing online after today's events. Now, on to the Metzlers, whose generous gift to the department made this event possible today and into the future. Mike and Terry both arrived separately at Georgia State in the summer of 1994. Mike came to Georgia State as a full professor after 13 years at Virginia Tech. Terry joined the department as a clinical instructor after 17 years as an elementary physical education teacher in Fulton County schools. But Terry was not new to Georgia State. She received her bachelor's degree here in 1997, or 1977, sorry. 1977. And her MED here in 1991, and worked as a part-time instructor before being hired full-time in 1994. Mike and Terry were hired by then Chair Dr. Jeff Rupp, who is also in the audience today, with one purpose in mind: to turn around the undergraduate and master's HPE teacher education programs that were barely surviving, with enrollments in the near single digits. Teaming up with then current faculty and being supported with new hires like Bonnie Blankenship, Deborah Shapiro, Rachel Gervich, Babs Green, and Shannon Williams, the HPE programs witnessed a period of steady growth, featuring innovative curricular practices and nationally recognized program assessment research. Mike would boast that GSU had not only the best HP program in the country, but also had the data to back that up. In 2003, Mike was appointed as an associate dean in the College of Education, primarily in charge of preparing teacher education programs for state review and national accreditation. His move to the 10th floor actually opened up the door for me to come to Georgia State in 2004 to take over his responsibilities in the HPE programs. No small shoes to fill. For about 15 months in 2004 and 2005, Mike served simultaneously as associate dean and chair of the KH department. And he has the nerve to joke about me coming back as interim chair after a 2-year break from a 6.5-year term as a sitting chair. Mike returned to the department in 2008 to rejoin Terry and the HPE faculty in maintaining the high-quality undergraduate and master's programs, along with a new PhD program in the physical education pedagogy. For Terry, fast forward to 2007, when she retired from her full-time duties in the department, but stayed on as a rehire appointment to teach courses, advise students, and coordinate our student teaching practicums. In 2013, she added part-time responsibilities as a health educator with Health Empowers. In 2014, she retired completely from KH and GSU and stayed on with Health and Powers until late 2017, declaring herself 100% retired. She spends as much time as she can with her grandchildren, gardening in the backyard, and working out at the Y and being creative with her various forms of artwork. How many of you here know about or have been to the Botanical Gardens here in Atlanta to see Scarecrows in the Garden, which is a juried art exhibit? Well, Terry won the blue ribbon in the professional division not once, but twice in recent years. So, Terry, we got a lot of talent there. Fast forward for Mike to January of 2017 when he retired from GSU after a career that included over 75 refereed papers, 3 research monographs, 11 books, over 30 invited lectures, and consultancies in 5 countries around the world. He not only served as a journal editor 3 times, he actually started a new journal in 1981, the Journal of Teaching and Physical Education, which is recognized as the top scholarly journal in that field. His many honors included fellowships in the National Academy of Kinesiology and the National Association for Kinesiology in Higher Education, induction into the Shape America Hall of Fame, and the University System of Georgia Board of Regents Scholarship of Teaching and Learning Award in 2012. The interest and activities leading to that last award were precursors to part of his post-retirement life. Since his early last year, he has served as a part-time person as the Associate Director to SOTL in GSU's Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. He works with faculty members at Georgia State who do research on their own teaching, helping with things from IRB proposals to data collection and manuscript writing. In addition to his work with SETL, he is a consultant for Health and Powers, the SNAP Ed grant, and after-school programs with Newton County. Rather than say he failed at retirement, he likes to refer to himself as happily semi-retired. Yeah, right. But it's not all work in his semi-retirement fantasy world. In his first weeks, he organized his collection of 1,500 Grateful Dead concert recordings. He goes to the Y as well, tinkers in his basement woodworking shop, and is now in the early stages of writing a book on what he calls his 2 journeys in cancer world, one being treated as a patient and the other as a 9-year survivor. As a couple, Mike and Terry love to hike trails in and around Atlanta, bird watch, explore the North Georgia mountains from their cabin in LJ, go to their favorite beach on the Florida Panhandle, and compete in chili cooking contests. How many of you know about or have attended the Cabbagetown Stomp and the Chomp Chili Cook-Off? I'm told it has over 90 competitors every year and is judged by professional chefs. In the past 5 years, Terry has placed as high as 3rd, and Mike has won it twice. From that summer in 1994 to the present, Mike and Terry, separately and now together, have been an integral part of the fabric of the KH programs, the HPE program, and the College of Education and Human Development, Georgia State University, and the community of Atlanta. We miss them all a lot, both as colleagues and friends. The halls of KH have been a bit void from the absence of the leadership, energy, and often laughter they brought to us. Once again, we express our gratitude for their generous gift that brings us together today, and we look forward to this special event for many years to come. Join me in welcoming Mike, who will introduce today's inaugural Metzler Distinguished Lecturer, Dr. Jim Salas. Mike?
Jackie, on behalf of Terry and myself, thank you for that introduction. I couldn't have said it better myself. And thanks to everyone here today and those watching the live streaming. It is truly a special day for us. Terry and I know firsthand what the KH Research Symposium Research Committee and Angela Turk have done to pull us off, and we also thank them for their hard work. We wanted this inaugural lecture to set the standard for all those to come. And the combination of their efforts with so many in attendance and an as yet unknown number watching it live, and having Jim Salas as our first speaker, the first bar is clearly a high one. As Jackie told you, Terry and I arrived at Georgia State and the KH department separately. We met as colleagues, and through our shared professional and personal interactions, became good friends. Around 2002, our relationship grew into a romantic one, and we became, as we were told, an item. We made that official when we got married in 2006. The KH department has been the main stage for our professional lives and the backdrop for much of our personal lives, not only bringing us together, but allowing us to meet and make many of our very best friends here and around Atlanta. The lecture is our way of expressing that gratitude to the department, the college, and the university. So, after considering some different ways to show that gratitude and deciding that the Metzler lecture would be it, the question, of course, became who should be invited as the first lecturer. Our thinking was to go big or stay home. So I suggested to Terry that we should lobby then Department Chair Mark Guile and the department faculty to invite Dr. Jim Salas. Not being a researcher, Terry's reaction was to be expected. Who's he? So I mentioned just a few of the things that you'll hear shortly about Dr. Salas, including that he is the former director of active living research. Terry then said, okay, I remember him that way. But didn't ALR turn you down twice for research grants? Why would you invite him? Good point, I replied. Let me think of some other names. Long story short, the only other name I could come up with was Tom McKenzie. But he wasn't available, and here you are. Full truth be told, Jim Salas was the first and only person we hoped to have as the inaugural Metzler lecturer. So after suggesting to Mark that he ask the KH faculty to endorse that invitation, which they did, and Jim being so generous and gracious to accept, and make a detour on his way to a speaking engagement in New Orleans, we indeed have gone big. For the record, Dr. Jim Salas is a distinguished professor of family and public health at San Diego State University. He also served as chief of the Division of Behavioral Medicine. He earned his PhD in clinical psychology from Memphis State in 1981, and after a postdoc at Stanford School of Medicine, he started his long and illustrious career in 1983 at San Diego State, from which he semi-retired in January of 2007. He described his as a semi-retirement, but he still maintains a level of production and contributions that would make any full-timer envious and tired. The purpose of the lecture is to feature scholarship, research, policy, and programs that promote physical activity for healthy living. We would be fortunate to get a speaker qualified to address 2, maybe 3 of those purposes, but hit the jackpot with Jim's credibility to speak to all 4 of them. Let me show you how, knowing that each of these descriptions will paint only a very small picture of his expertise and qualifications. In the field of physical activity for healthy living, Dr. Salas exemplifies the interdisciplinary scholar, applying his expertise and passion in a large number of related venues, agencies, and organizations, such as the American College of Sports Medicine, the American Heart Association, the American Psychological Association, and the Society of Behavioral Medicine, all of which he holds fellow status in. The International Council for Physical Activity and Fitness Research, the International Society of Health Psychology, Active Healthy Kids Atlanta, and so on, and so on, and so on. As I've noted, he was director of active living research, which was funded by the Robert Woods Johnson Foundation to support scientifically rigorous solution-oriented research from investigators and scholars representing diverse disciplines and backgrounds. His research credentials in the field of physical activity for healthy living are equally impressive and more than challenging to sum up in a short time. So I'll share them with a very few impressive numbers. He has more than 700 journal articles, books, and book chapters across almost every known discipline related to physical activity. He has been the PI, co-PI, or a contributing investigator on grants that total more than $33 million. Nearly $80 million if the funding for active living research is included. If the researchers watching this today want to be humbled, go to Google Scholar and see how many times your work has been cited by others. And then compare that to Jim's current total of 152,000 citations, and surely counting as I speak. When he publishes, people read it and they use it. In the very best tradition of Ernie Boyer's notion of the engaged scholar, Dr. Salas uses his expertise and standing to inform and influence those who make policy that promotes physical activity. His advice has been sought by, and again, just a few examples, organizations such as the San Diego Childhood Obesity Initiative, the Partnership for a Healthy America, the National Conference of State Legislators, CDC, the National Cancer Institute, the Australian Strategic Intergovernmental Group on Physical Activity and Health, and again, many, many more. I forgot, he is even consulted with First Lady Michelle Obama. All right? The boy gets around. Not content with just collecting and publishing data, Jim has been a leader of a team that in 1989 developed Sports, Play, and Active Recreation for Kids, or SPARK, which uses evidence-based physical activity and nutrition programs to provide curriculum, staff development, follow-up support, and equipment to P-12 teachers and students. It is used in thousands. Are you watching your slides flash in front of you? I'm sorry, I'm doing that. But definitely not on purpose. All right? It is used literally in thousands of schools across the U.S. SPARK has been honored as an exemplary program of the U.S. Department of Education, cited in the Surgeon General's report as a school-based solution to our nation's healthcare crisis, and awarded the highest ranking for the elementary and middle school PE programs by the Cooper Institute. But enough already about Jim's prolific professional life. Through a mutual friend, our communications in preparing for the visit, and over dinner last night with Terry and I, we've learned that he likes running on the beach, taking hikes in and around San Diego, and is a member of a regular running group. He enjoys nouveau Southern cuisine, attributable to his Mississippian roots. He and Terry share a liking of New Zealand white wines. He and I share an affinity for the Grateful Dead and Jerry Garcia ties. But apparently he didn't get the memo about today. But what caught my interest most was learning that Jim plays in not one, but two bands when he and his bandmates can find the time to jam. I have to say, in finishing, that trying to keep this introduction to less than 10 minutes turned into a real challenge after I read the full scope of his contributions in so many facets of healthy living through physical activity. Like all of you, Terry and I are honored to be here today to hear what Jim has to tell us all about the role of interdisciplinary research in making cities more conducive to physical activity and his thoughts about the Beltline's potential for that. So, Dr. Salas, let the words be yours. I'm done with mine.
Great, thank you. Thank you. I don't know if I'm going to come up with a good Grateful Dead quote to match yours, but I'll do my best. I'll do my best. Thank you to Mike and Terry for this wonderful invitation to be the inaugural lecturer here, and thank you all for coming. So this is pretty amazing. And I've met with several of you throughout the day. I want to make my visit here as useful as possible. And it's been a pleasure and well put together. And I really applaud Mike and Terry for setting up this program, which will be a lasting legacy for all of their contribution to the department profession that will go on for many years, I'm sure. After Mike shared with me a very large hard drive with 1,500 Grateful Dead concerts on it, I could hardly come and share the few things I can share with you today. So what I want to do is talk about active cities. I've been working in promoting physical activity, trying to get the country, the world more active, and using whatever tools that I could find or come up with to do that. As I went through my own journey, I learned to be bolder and to focus on bigger questions, and to try to figure out what's it going to take to get people more active, and not be satisfied with the question, well, would it have any impact if I did this? Because I think a lot of times we use a limited number of tools, and, well, I can only have two class periods in an elementary school year. Let me see what I can accomplish with that. So I said, we really need to think bigger, to be bolder in our approaches. So I want to give you some examples of how I have been trying to do that, and invite and challenge you to be bold in your own ways of making the best of your career in the service of people's health. So I thought I had a picture on here, but maybe I didn't. But anyway, this is what I'm going to talk about. And I'm going to talk about interdisciplinary research. So I'm going to talk very briefly about how, as a field, we've moved from exercise to physical activity to active living. I want to make sure you understand what ecological models are. Some people call them socio-ecological models because they've been the basis for what I've been doing. And I'm going to talk about what we've learned through our research about creating active cities. And I'm going to talk about the macro level and the micro level. And show that how we can use this information to understand inequities in opportunities for physical activity, and then hopefully correct some of those. I want to talk about the co-benefits of active design, which help us communicate with people who are not necessarily as interested in health as we are. And then looking back on working in this field for 15 or 20 years, I want to show that not only have we made progress in research, but we've really had an impact on society. And hopefully that will, again, embolden you to think big. And you might think, well, 20 years, that's forever. But really, it's not. In talking about some of the things here. And then I was encouraged to make a few provocative comments about the Beltline, which is probably the biggest physical activity-related initiative in Atlanta. And that's not because I'm an expert on it, because I'm not, but to get some conversation started at the end as a place to start. And so we should have plenty of time for discussion. So why maybe some of you students especially are thinking, gee, is physical activity a big enough deal to justify a degree and think that I can make my career in this? And I just want to say, yes, I think it's definitely big enough for that because it's one of the leading causes of death and certainly one of our biggest health challenges in this millennium. And just to show you how the United States is faring, I want to show you a little bit of data here. This is accelerometer-based moderate to vigorous physical activity in adolescents. These are comparably scored data from about 10 countries. And I circled the data point for the country with the lowest physical activity on this. Uh-oh. Okay. And it happens to be the United States. All right. So in these data, these kids are getting an average of 45 minutes a day of physical activity. I'm sure all of you know the guidelines are 60 minutes a day, so we're pretty far below that. And just compare the highest value is Norway. It's about 84 minutes, so not far from double the amount of activity our adolescents are doing. So if you're like Mike and Terry, devoting your career to getting kids active, you've got a lot of work ahead of you. And it's very important that you be successful so that these inactive kids don't become even more inactive than the adult that we are today. And speaking of that, I always feel guilty talking about activity to a bunch of people. If you want to stand up and stand at the edge, please feel free to do that. And at the end, we're going to take an activity break. So there will be some relief if you're worried about that. Okay. So in the exercise science field really came out of sports and leisure. And all we've talked about through most of the history of this field is leisure activity. And then in the, I guess it was the 80s, we decided, well, maybe exercise is not necessary and being vigorous and sweating is not necessary to get some of the health benefits. So we started talking about physical activity. So that brought in more focus on moderate intensity physical activity. So it broadened our concept of physical activity. But in the United States, we've forgotten that we used to get physical activity in other ways. And sure, yeah, leisure, but leisure, you think, used to be a part of every culture, including things like dance. You know, work used to mean work, actually moving something, doing something. Most of us don't do that anymore. For most of the history of humankind, we've the technology that we use to get around were these feet. All right, so we've kind of gone beyond that in our technology apparently. And then household activities used to not include electrified things. So we would wash clothes and wash dishes, and you had to do a little movement for those kinds of things. So we call these the domains of physical activity. These were not really incorporated very much into physical activity until about year 2000 or so, not very long ago. And this is what we mean by active living. Because before technology, in all of these areas, life was active. Life had to be active. You wanted to eat, you went out and farmed or hunted or fished or something like that. Now, app, delivery. It's zero calories. You can order up 1,000,000 calories, all right? So obesity is not that much of a mystery, really, in a situation like that. What's happened? So now we're thinking about all of these type domains of activity. but something has happened over time. You see what this spells out here? All of the, our whole lifestyle has become very sloth-like. And we've replaced activity, or the need for activity, with technology. And you see, we entertain ourselves electronically. Most people work at computers, or even farming is highly, highly mechanized. Our transportation is by car overwhelmingly, and our homes are full of labor-saving devices. So we have very systematic engineered physical activity out of our lives. I like to think of it as the physical activity extermination project. It's been going on since at least the Industrial Revolution 200 years ago. And just when you think there is no more activity to get out of our lives, then we have new technologies that I was talking to a group about today of electric rideables and hoverboards and electric skateboards, et cetera, which are now showing up on sidewalks in my neighborhood, and I predict they will be showing up on sidewalks in your neighborhood, because they're solving the problem of there's just way too much walking in this country. Okay, we have to solve the problem of too much walking. Okay. So anyway, now we are at a crisis point. I think it's a slow-moving crisis point of very inactive people. But using an active living model does provide us with more opportunities for promoting activity. And I would say we have the most opportunity still in leisure time. Even though leisure activity, leisure exercise is not a natural behavior. How many people do you think during the cave person times were going out jogging in the morning? I don't think that was happening. They didn't need to do that. They were tired because they were working. They were walking everywhere. It's not a natural behavior. We'll never get everybody exercising. But in parts of the world right now, and in even very developed parts of the world right now, they don't drive everywhere. Parts of civilized world, as you might call it, they walk and bike in very, very large numbers. So I think we can recover active transportation much more than we have already. So anyway, I'm going to talk about, I'm going to focus on designing cities for activity, because right now cities are finely engineered to make active transportation in particular difficult, unsafe, or impossible. And so we have actually worked hard to delete active transportation from our cities. We need places for active recreation as well, parks and private facilities, but I'm going to focus more on designing cities so that people can be active. But also there's evidence that that the way we design cities contributes to very many of the biggest problems in the world right now. Chronic disease, depression, road traffic injuries, air pollution, noise, social isolation, a fear of crime, and health inequalities. So by designing cities more with a health point of view, we can actually solve many of these problems. And along with air pollution comes carbon emissions as well. So another major challenge, maybe some people say the biggest challenge to humanity right now. So I was trained as a psychologist, and so I was trained in this part of the model, that behavior is influenced by things within the individual, like our biology and psychology, and by our social and cultural environment. So those were the tools I was taught as a psychologist. If you want to change behavior, you have to motivate and educate people about how to change. And I tried to do that, and in my experience was, it didn't work very well. Didn't work very well. I said, okay, we have to find a better way. So I started looking around, and I discovered there is a history of ecological models in behavior change. And so that included things like organizations, the physical environment, the policies that are enacted in society. And by taking action and understanding the higher levels, it has the potential, at least, or the promise of compensating for some of the weaknesses of just working with individuals. So if I want to start an exercise program, I'm gonna find some limitations. One is that most people don't want to participate in a program, so you don't attract many people. And if you've tried to recruit people for an exercise study, then you probably found that to be difficult. The second thing is when people change, yes, we can help people change through motivational strategies, but the changes are not very large most of the time. And physical activity is notorious for not maintaining well. People don't keep it up very well after the program ends. But if you change the environment, if you put a park in a neighborhood, that park is going to be there forever. On the other hand, if you make a neighborhood and you don't put a park, you may never have a park in that neighborhood. So there's a permanence to it. And if let's say that park, it's available to everybody that lives in that neighborhood or wants to come outside of that neighborhood and use it. It's not just available to people who are participating in a program. So when you change the environment and policy, you have the chance to make population-wide and long-term changes, which is why I've been relying on this model. And it's helped me and many others think about, well, what are the environments? What are the policies that are going to be most effective in helping people be active? And we have enough research now that we can identify key settings or key parts of a city that determine whether it's going to support physical activity. So one is parks and open spaces, so people have a chance to be active for recreation that are generally free, except for some programs. The way we design cities and how we use land is critically important. I'll talk about that a little more. The way we develop our transportation system makes a fundamental impact on the way our cities work and how people behave within them. And if you're not a transportation professional, I will summarize for you in one phrase our transportation goals in this country. And our goal is to move as many cars as fast as possible. So what is the place of active transportation like walking and biking in that? Doesn't count. In fact, pedestrians and bicyclists, they kind of get in the way of cars. Cars do better when people aren't around. Cars need their own space. So also schools. Many of you work in schools. And there are several levels of schools. Where is the school? How is the school designed? What are the facilities for physical activity? And what are the policies in that school that affect programs in the school, as well as, let's say, use by the broader community. And then buildings and workplaces. Again, where are they? How many people can get to the workplace by walking, biking, or transit? Are there places to do recreational activity in and around the building? Do you design the building so that you hide the stairs and celebrate the elevator? That seemed to be the rule in the architecture profession for several decades, which we think is not necessary and counterproductive. So these are the settings that we now have evidence can be designed to promote activity or not. And so we've learned a lot about that. How many of these settings are controlled by the public health department. So the public health department makes the decisions and policies about which of these settings. None of them. None. We have data now that decisions about these settings and how they're designed affect health. So at public health, the medical care system has to pick up the pieces, clean up the mess that's produced by the chronic disease caused by inactivity, but public health does not have any role in making decisions. And there's no law that says public health has to. So if we're going to bring our evidence from health to people in these disciplines, in these fields, we have to come as friends and create partnerships. We can't impose anything upon them. So we need to partner. We need to partner. We need to get to know these people because planners design neighborhoods, transportation engineers design the facilities, park and recreation professionals and landscape architects plan and manage parks, and educators and architects control schools and workplaces. So, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. So we actually have data, or creating data, that are relevant to many other disciplines, and through them affect health. Okay, I like to show this because it's a good summary of how we have come to the point where we have one of the highest rates of car use and lowest rates of active transportation in the world. And these are actual US postage stamps that celebrate these major features of the American landscape. They were on a sheet of stamps called the American landscape. And think about how much of our landscape is devoted to these residential subdivisions, all right? And so these are created by separate use zoning. And separate use zoning means you separate all the uses. You put houses here, you put big box commercial stores here, you put separated office parks over here, and you put schools somewhere else, so that all these distances are too great for you to walk, so you have to drive. So that's great if you're a car company, not so good if you're a public health person. And now, if by some chance you have your neighborhood, your subdivision was right next to the neighborhood Walmart, and you could walk there, well, maybe we could put a freeway in between them so that you couldn't walk there. All right? So, certainly the result of the zoning laws that we have and the plan and the transportation goals that we have been to decimate active transportation in this country. And if you look here, I'm not sure when they took this picture, because I'm not sure whenever an interchange like that would have like 3 cars on it. I haven't seen that. But the other thing to notice is this is perfectly suited for cars. And you'll notice not only do you see no people in this picture, but on interstate highways, pedestrians and bicyclists are prohibited by law. You may not use these $1 trillion worth of infrastructure. That's there for cars only. Thank you very much. So, and if you make decisions like this, and we put trillions of dollars over decades of time into creating our country that looks like this, what's one of the consequences of that? Do you see this ominous word up here? These things are going to be here a long, long time. And guess what? We're still making them. We're still doing it. And now I want to show you some data of why it's not a good idea, at least if you care about health at all. So now let's look at the macro view of how do you make an active city and how much does it matter. Here are 2 cities, or parts of 2 cities. Everybody recognizes this one, okay? Manhattan, the most walkable neighborhood in America. also the leanest and least obese neighborhood in America. And look at it, it's wrong button. It's got this wonderful park, the jewel of New York. And what makes it a walkable city? Well, it's mixed use. You don't have separation of where you live and where you want to go. It's all right there. It's all right there in your building, in your neighborhood, a few blocks over, close by. You can walk and get just about anything you want. If not, you walk to the subway and you're there. And you can see very clearly the streets are laid out in a grid, the famous avenues and streets of New York. Hard to get lost, very hard to get lost. I always dare anybody to tell me, where is this? Where is that picture taken? I'll take some guesses. San Diego. It looks like San Diego, doesn't it? It could be San Diego. It's not San Diego. Is it LA? It could be LA. Most of LA looks kind of like that. It's not LA. Utah. Could be, but it's not. It could be virtually any city in the U.S. that has a hill. Because they all have the freeways. They all have the freeways. But I am here to report to you that the United States does not have a copyright on bad city planning. This is, I was flabbergasted. I was flying into this city and saw this. I have to take a picture out of the plane. This is Cape Town, South Africa. Looks like every suburb in the United States. And the traffic looks the same as well. So we are not only putting our own population in ill health, we are exporting our methods of building in other parts of the country. So if you want to move cars, you design a city that looks like this, that gives huge amounts of land to cars. And if you want to move people, you build cities like we have always built them before cars. We've always known how to build walkable cities where people can walk to where they want to go because we had to, because that's all we had was walking. We decided to ignore millennia of experience and do things the new way, the newfangled way, and we're paying that price now with that price. So I will get to some data in a minute. But it's useful to be reminded throughout human history, cities were built for people, and even in the early 20th century, people could still use the streets. This is actually Canal Street in New Orleans, where I'm going. I'm going to be tomorrow, and there were some trams and people walking around in the street, and nobody's afraid. Nobody's going to get run over. And here you got to dodge a few horses, but you can be on the street. And then we decided, well, let's give the streets to the cars, let them take over, and have that worked out just fantastically. Traffic, we wanted cars, we have cars. Now we've got cars everywhere. And so it's a little bit different. And so this is just showing the single-use zoning, houses, big box store, where the parking area is almost as big as the store itself. And the message is, you need to walk. You need to drive here because you're going to have a hard time walking across those roads anyway. And there's the parking lot. And then here's an office park, literally out in the middle of nowhere, so that nobody can walk and bike. We're going to make sure of that. Okay. And I said that New York has connected streets. Well, why does that matter? It matters because if you live in a gridded street where the streets are highly connected, you can walk a direct route. And you don't have to go this street. You could go over here and have a different view. But in the suburbs, to go the same distance, look what you've got to do. You've got to go all the way out here. This is where all the traffic is. Everybody has to go there. Then you have to go there. It seems ridiculous that you would design streets so that you can't walk places. But that's what we do on a grand scale. And what does mixed use mean? it means that you have a lot of options to go within walking distance. So here's a suburban area, and if your house is here, this is the area that you can get to by walking, I think, 1 kilometer. And in fact, you can't get to anything except other houses. So these two are different uses, and you can't get there. Whereas if you live in a mixed-use area, you can cover a lot more area and look at all the different colors, meaning different uses of the land. So our land use policies are very, very strongly tied to health. And then you can decide to do crazy things like take cars off the streets altogether and have a pedestrian zone. And this is one of the few that I know of in the U.S. It's in Boston. And of course, every community needs a park. And again, I don't know why I just have Boston here, but this is the oldest park in the United States, Boston Common. Still beloved, still widely used. You know, cars did not make it go extinct or to become irrelevant. Still works. Okay, now a little bit of data. Pardon me. So this is the first study that our group did on the relation between built environment and physical activity. And we have a lot of health people, and we have an urban planner on the team. So this starts the interdisciplinary work. And this is a study called Neighborhood Quality of Life, or NICLS. And basically, we recruited people from different kinds of neighborhoods. We identified neighborhoods that were high walkable and low walkable, and I'll show you what that looks like, and also higher income and lower income, so that we could have a chance to examine disparities in these relationships. And people wore accelerometers, and we had about 2,000 people in this study. And so we're looking at them stratified by low income and high income. And the bars on the right, or the blue, I think it's blue, is the high walkable neighborhood. And so you can see there's the high walkable, people in the high walkable neighborhood are doing more physical activity, objectively measured, than the people in low walkable neighborhoods. And that applies to both low income and high income. But if you could see the numbers, you'd see, oh, there's only about a 5 to 7 minute per day difference. And 5 to 7 minutes per day doesn't sound like a lot, but this applies to every day of the year. So let's see what might happen in a year. And so if we said, okay, about 50 minutes, that's 50 minutes a week is about 2 miles per week, that's if you're walking really, really, really slow. And that's about 100 miles a year, and that's about 10,000 calories per year, and that would average out to about almost 3 pounds. So just by integrating activity into your daily life, you could potentially prevent 3 pounds of weight gain in a year. And that's much more than the average adult gains in the US. So just by living there, this applies to everybody as long as they're there. And we found obesity differences as well. And we did a similar study with adolescents. And you see the graph looks pretty much the same. All right? So we did similar with older adults. Looks pretty much the same. And this is a little different, but this is obesity of children depending on the type of neighborhood they live in. And this is our baseline data from this. And so you can see here the highest rates of obesity are among children who live in a neighborhood that doesn't support physical activity very well and doesn't support healthy eating very well. And the kids with the lowest rates of obesity live where the neighborhoods are supportive of physical activity and healthy eating. Okay, so directly connecting to obesity. And this is a big difference, 18% versus 12% obesity rates. And this is 6 to 11-year-old children. So we've got data that the way you design cities makes a difference across the lifespan. Okay, and this is one study, or maybe 3 or 4 I'm showing you out of many hundreds that we have now. Okay, let's zoom in. Let's zoom in with a microscope and look at the streetscape, at the street level, what you're going to experience as a pedestrian. And so on this top one, if you design for cars, it looks like this. All right, you want a lot of pavement. You don't want any distractions for drivers, so you want a boring landscape because you want them to concentrate on the road, and you want them to go fast, so you don't want to have a lot of stoplights or anything, and who cares if somebody wants to walk? Here's a poor guy. Follow me as doctor orders. Go out and take a walk. He's motivated, he's educated, and he's afraid for his life. Afraid he might get killed. And is he going to do that again? Probably not, if he can help it. But look at the bottom picture. If you design a place for people to walk, you might design a street that looks like this. Much less space for cars, so they're going to go slower. A nice sidewalk, an actual sidewalk for pedestrians. Trees to make them comfortable. Something interesting to look at because there's stores along here, and they're designed. This is pedestrian design. So so you're walking along and you can look right in the stores. What about the design here? It's not pedestrian design. You're walking here. You're looking at a parking lot. That's not very interesting. So you can see the difference there. Which one of these would you rather walk on more than once? Probably the bottom one. So we developed a tool to measure these characteristics so that we could quantify these differences. And we call this our MAPS measure. And I'm going to explain this cryptic graphic for you here. But this shows kind of the level of correlation between between the score on the maps and walking for transportation. And we started out this MAPS observation tool. So you walk down the street and code the things you see. We started out with 120 items, and we said, well, that's too many. So we cut it down, then we cut it down again to 15 items. So here's 15 items. And here's the ones that made it to the 15. And if you can see, some of them are, and so then we related that to active transportation of children, adolescents, adults, and older adults. And if you see a box, it means that the correlation between those was significant, even after adjusting for overall walkability. And the darker the color, the more significant. All right, so you can tell at a glance what's most related. And I put in red the items with correlation or significant with 3 age groups. So street lights, benches, which seems odd, because benches are for sitting, but it's related to walking. But if you're not expecting pedestrians, you probably won't have a bench. So you're actually thinking about pedestrians if you have a bench. Having a sidewalk, that's good. We think sidewalk is essential infrastructure. A buffer, that means that there's something in between the sidewalk and the traffic. It might be a strip of grass, it might be parked cars. But it's something so you don't have the mirrors of the trucks going right by your ear, which is not that pleasant. And then the other one is curb cuts, the ramps for wheelchairs and people with disabilities, and lots of people get that. And so you can see that the most correlations are with children and adults. But if we look at the grand score, the overall score, it's significant for all 4 age groups. All right, so again, we're finding if you design for physical activity, it works for throughout the age span. Okay, so that's the micro. Again, there's many other studies like this, but I'm trying not to overwhelm you with data, just show you some examples. and this is from the same paper, showing that there's a linear relationship. So meaning the better you design the streetscape for pedestrians, the more people will walk for transportation. And so wherever your city is starting or wherever your neighborhood is starting, you can improve it. And the more you improve it, the better your outcomes are. And we see this same linear relationship for children and adolescents, for adults and older adults. So again, across the age range. So what are the lessons of this the tip of the iceberg of the data? Both the design of cities overall and the design of streetscapes are important for physical activity across the lifespan. More is better. So the better you design it for pedestrians, the more activity you're going to get. And so these data are relevant to zoning laws and suggest that we should be changing our zoning laws. They're relevant for transportation goals and funding, meaning that we need more and better sidewalks and bicycle facilities and public transit, because public transit is active because you've got to walk to and from the station. And then the transportation departments to measure active travel, which many of them don't. And we want more funding for parks because parks need to be in every neighborhood and they need to be good parks. We have other data showing that the more physical activity facilities are in a park, the more people come to the park and the more active they are. So active design is good design. Okay, now I'm going to, so we just talked about the maps. I'm going to show you how our maps tool can be used in fighting against health inequalities. So here are disparities in leisure time physical activity. So this is CDC data. I'm pretty sure this is behavioral risk factor surveillance system data. And here's kind of the overview. Leisure activity. This is percent who were inactive during their leisure time. So women were more likely to be inactive. And inactive for this means they didn't report any leisure activity for the past month. So, but 32% of women, 28% of men didn't. I'm going to flip here, and I'll just say they're too lazy to lie. All right, they're not even lying and say, "Oh yeah, I did something." And I didn't do anything. Okay, and then as people get older, they become more inactive, and then the race and ethnic groups with the highest level of inactivity are non-Hispanic, Black, and Hispanics. And you can see they're above the other groups. And look at the education curve. People with the least education, so many. I mean, that's the steepest disparity right there in education. But there are disparities. And so one of our questions is, are there also disparities in the quality of physical activity environments? So I'm going to show you a couple of our papers where we looked at that. And so here are two walkable neighborhoods. All right? This is a low-income neighborhood, and you can see, you know, it's mixed use, it's connected streets, it's relatively high density. But it's not, and it's okay, but it's not particularly attractive. They're not working hard to make it aesthetically pleasing. And this one, it's similar. It's mixed use, it's connected streets, but it's got flowers here, it's got trees all over the place. So they're working to make it a higher quality environment to really attract people to come and be active there. Okay, so we did a couple of studies. In this one, we looked at the quality of parks in several parts of the country, and by going out and seeing how many physical activity facilities are there. And we did this in the Seattle region and the Baltimore region and found very different results. In the Seattle region, we found an unexpected pattern. Potentially, and that was, the unexpected pattern was, we found higher park quality in the low-income and minority neighborhoods. higher park quality. And that may be because this city targeted investments in parks within the Seattle region. That they had a policy to promote equity in all city services, including parks. And so that, we think, led them to invest more so in parks in disadvantaged parts of the city. So I would consider these equitable differences to help make up for the inequities in chronic diseases. In the Baltimore region, we found more what we were expecting to find. The greatest disparities existed among the high minority neighborhoods. And so we found that parks in low-income areas had lower quality. All right? So the lesson that we get from this is the pattern of disparities is probably a local issue, depends on local policies. And to study this, you need local data. You can't just assume what the patterns of disparities are. So we hope that measures like we have used here could be used by city planners, by health departments, by community organizations all over the country to say, what are the disparities in our community, in our neighborhood? So we did a similar study with MAPS, the MAPS study, or the MAPS measure. And we found something a little different. We found that low income and high racial ethnic minority neighborhoods had aesthetic and social features that made them less pedestrian friendly. So like those two pictures I just showed you. In the higher income neighborhood, it was more aesthetically pleasing. We found that pedestrian features varied greatly between and within cities. So we couldn't even generalize across residential areas and commercial areas. So it was a very complex set of findings. And so our conclusion is, given each city's unique pedestrian environment, local streetscapes audits are needed to determine how to best allocate resources to address disparities in pedestrian environments. So, so if you're a researcher, I think this is a really good area to look into. If you want to be an advocate for improving your own neighborhood or neighborhoods where you work, then I think collecting local data is a great place to start. Okay, right. Now, kind of toward the end here, outcomes for multiple audiences. As us physical activity researchers, we value physical activity. So we're happy just studying that. But practitioners in these other sectors want to know about outcomes relevant to their sector, you know, for workplaces or for transportation, for parks, for agriculture. And if you're an elected official, you must consider many outcomes, not only health, but you're especially interested in the economic outcomes. And we can think of, in the health field, we might think of these other outcomes as co-benefits. And if we assess and try to understand what are the co-benefits of designing active cities, this can help us have a bigger impact on policy and practice by speaking directly to the interest and the agendas of these practitioners and policymakers. So we also might want to know, are there any unintended consequences or unintended side effects of what we're doing? Those are important to understand. So, okay, now I think this is the last piece of data I'm going to show you. This is the results, a very broad overview of a series of literature searches that we did. Because in each of these settings that we saw before, we wanted to see what's the evidence about multiple benefits of designing these places for activity. So within the parks area, we looked at proximity of parks. We looked at the quality of parks. We looked at proximity of trails. And these are the co-benefits we looked at. So all of them, pardon me, we looked at, we started with designs that supported physical activity. But we also looked at physical health, mental health, social health, like social cohesion, environmental sustainability, both pollution and carbon emissions, safety from crime and injury prevention, and also economic benefits. So we did that with all these settings, and this is kind of the overview. And if it's green, that means that we found substantial evidence of co-benefits for this cell of the table. And you can see most of it is green. So we found a lot of evidence for co-benefits. So for example, if we design parks and trails to be maximally activity promoting, we get physical health benefits, mental health, social, environmental, safety, economic, all of them. Okay? All of the settings, we found evidence of economic benefits. Sometime to property owners, sometime to the city, sometime to real estate, sometime to retailers. So there are many groups can benefit economically through active design. And you're probably saying, oh, there's one red one there. What's that? And that had to do with, in urban design, specifically for very high density areas, some of those tend to be high in crime as well. All right, so that's where that red came from. But otherwise, we found a lot of evidence for co-benefits. Okay. Well, now, I just want to show you a couple more pieces of data here that we can actually look now at environments that have changed and what is their impact on physical activity. So here's an evaluation of Safe Routes to School funding. They got federal funding from the Transportation Department in 5 states. This is just an evaluation in 5 states, several hundred schools. And what did they do with their money? Among other things, they did things like build sidewalks or improve sidewalks, make crosswalks safer, put up some signage about school crossing. You know, really wild, crazy things. No, they're quite sensible, the things that you would think are basic so kids can walk to school. And the results were not much impact on bicycling, but look how low bicycling is. But walking to school went from 10%, which is very, very low, to 14%, which is still low, but it's a 40% improvement. So I'd say that's pretty encouraging. There's other studies that are similar. And what about bicycling? If you look at controlled studies in the scientific literature, single bicycle interventions don't work. So things like putting a bike share in, or putting a bike lane, or putting bike parking. No single intervention is going to work. But here are case studies of cities around the world that started out at 1% bicycling, of trips by bicycling, and all of them increased. Okay? And including places where you would think, oh, it'd be really bad to bicycle, maybe Minneapolis. They bicycle in the snow in the winter. Now, because they've designed it that way. But, including places you might not expect, Bogota, Colombia. And then we can look farther at cities that started well above 1%, and all of them increased as well, except for Groningen, Netherlands. They started at 40%, they ended at 40%. So maybe that's the maximum. But they did a lot of work to make this happen. And so I think this is evidence that cities can, if they work at it, they can increase bicycling. Okay, all right. I'm going to show you. So we want this research to be used, and hopefully, we'll put more sidewalks in. We hope the planning is a little better than what we see here. So if you think that's funny, I have a couple of pictures from Atlanta for you, just to show that every city has a way to go. And these are my colleagues. Here's a colleague from Australia, and we found one of these that said, no, you've walked far enough. You don't need to walk anymore. No more sidewalk for you. Okay. And then, well, maybe you could call that a sidewalk. I'm not sure. Looks like a liability lawsuit. Okay. But so all this work by many people around the world has had an impact on science. Here's a special issue of the world's most influential medical journal, The Lancet, on urban design, transport, and health. I thought that was very good recognition, the scientific world. Surgeon General, a couple of years ago, has a call to action, not just a report, call to action on walking and walkable communities. So this is on the public health agenda now. When we first published our first paper on walkability, people said, the reviewers said, you must put a glossary in your paper because we don't know what you're talking about. But now, Surgeon General knows what we're talking about, so this is good. Just last year, the Community Guide approved a recommendation for built environment approaches combining transportation interventions and land use. Approved as an evidence-based strategy for promoting physical activity. We're having impact across sectors. Here's kind of a funny one. I don't know if you can read it on this T-shirt. It says, this is the Metropolitan Cardiac Authority. So they're getting the idea that public transportation is good for your health. And real estate developers started this initiative through the Urban Land Institute, building healthy places. Real estate people. The AARP, the country's largest membership organization, 42 million members, has age-friendly communities, livable, walkable communities that they're now promoting and advocating. But we're still building places that we have evidence contribute to ill health. And so I hope all of you will become advocates for your own neighborhood, your own city. I invite you to go to our Active Living Research website where we have summaries of research that are easy to read and written for practitioners and policymakers. And we have lots of infographics we think are good conversation starters. Now, a couple of thoughts on the Beltline. See if I can stimulate some discussion here. One is, I've been on the Beltline on, what do you call it, your open streets, Streets Alive, on Streets Alive a year or two ago. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. Here's some friendly Beltline supporters. Here is new development along the Beltline, which is probably your biggest selling point. I mean, that's really dramatic and amazing. And bike parking there and art. It's got a lot going for it. I think it's really a dramatic transformation of the city. A couple of thoughts. Our colleague Deborah Cohen in Los Angeles showed that the strongest predictor of park use and physical activity by far was events and programs. And this could be the case for a linear park like the Beltline. And hopefully there is an office to facilitate community groups to use the Beltline for events and programs. Anybody know, is there such an office? There is, okay. Okay, good, thumbs up on that one. Active Living Research years ago did fund some studies. We turned down Mike, unfortunately, but we did fund a few studies. And one of them was a 3-city study of trails that showed population density and attractive destinations along trails were among the best correlates of trail use. So the Beltline is well placed for access in many destinations, but maybe one lesson from this is enhancing access through more points where you can get to the Beltline and rezoning near the Beltline to have more destinations and more people living there would make it even more successful. So maybe something to think about. And equity of access to health and economic resources is always a concern. So special attention should be paid to maximizing the value of Beltline in lower income communities it passes through. And so I'm sure that there's some of that going on, but probably more would always be better. Major economic impacts are already very apparent and dramatic and are likely to grow. And it's, I think what additional thing to think about is to assure that the business opportunities are appropriate for each neighborhood that they're in. They support truly local businesses, so try to support grassroots businesses, and are used to improve equity across the city. So I think that's probably going to be an ongoing challenge. And it's a powerful stimulant of walking and biking. But what about looking beyond the Beltline a little bit to make sure they are safe routes to the Beltline? And as people are walking and biking to the Beltline, that it's really optimized for active transportation. So I think I'll just leave it there. And so I'll invite you to become an active city advocate. And here's a report that includes data on our benefits survey, and it shows a lot of examples from around the world of cities that have prioritized active design and benefited greatly from that. And this is written for city leaders like mayors and city councils and that sort of thing. So it's something you can download. And interestingly, this was developed by Nike, who you might not expect to do something like this. Okay, so I think I've talked long enough. I'm going to leave this up here. And then I'm going to invite you to participate in a little activity break. And so I'll invite you to stand if you can, and to do as much of this as you can. And I know there's some physical educators here. So I'm going to invite the Metzlers up to help me here and to show continued leadership. Any other physical educators that want to get in on this? Oh, the whole front row. Come on, let's have at least one person here. Come on. Okay, come on, both of them. Come on, come on, come on. Okay, so let's start walking. Okay, so we're going to walk to the Beltline. We're going to walk to the Beltline. You're going to join us? Okay, fantastic. So I'm going to start. I like to do the world's simplest activity breaks and just make up stuff and to get us moving a little bit. Let's see. What are we going to do? I think we're going to go and we're going to get on our bike. And we're going to ride on the Beltline for a little bit. So let's ride on the Beltline for a little bit. Oh, this was good. That just got me 10,000 steps. Okay. And all right, very good. So who's got one they want to do? Terry.
Put me on the spot. Okay. So we're going to get off our bike, right?
Get off your bike.
All right, and let's do some jogging.
Okay, we're going to jog on the Beltline.
All right.
Okay.
We're jogging.
Okay, what are we going to do next? Who's ready? Okay.
Yeah,
We're going to meet some people, and we're going to do a friendly boxing match with them. Good, we get our arms working a little bit. Okay, what are we going to do next?
We're going to jump.
Jump rope, jump rope. Double dutch. Okay.
All right, let's step it up and do a jumping jack or two.
Okay, jumping jack. If you can do it. If you can do it. Okay, that's enough. We don't want people fainting here, but keep walking. Okay, Mike, we're going to have you finish up. What activity? You're one of your favorite activities to do.
We're going to march to the Beltline.
Okay. Okay. Thank our activity leaders. Thank you. Okay, anybody feel better? Okay, very good. Yeah.
All right, got our heart rates going again. So thank you, Dr. Salas, for your remarks. You've certainly given us a lot to think about for the profession and for the health of Atlanta and the cities that our students will settle in once they graduate from Georgia State. It's my honor to invite Mike and Terry back to the stage to help me thank you for your presentation, and Dr. Wu will help me unveil the perpetual plaque, which will remain in the department to remind us of the speakers who present the Mike and Terry Metzler Distinguished Lecture. We're so proud to have had a renowned individual for our inaugural lecture in the series. So, Dr. Salas.
Okay.
Jerry, bring the plaque.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and Mike and Terry have some additional gifts for you. So.
Jim, on behalf of Terry and myself, please accept this bag of gifts, and I'll allow you to open it later, but it does include a book called City on the Verge by Mark Pendergrass, who's an Atlanta native, and the focus of the book is the potential of the Beltline. And I believe Mark is actually watching online. So thank you
Good
again.
work, Mark. I think I have met Mark.
Oh,
Yes,
really?
I believe I have.
All right.
Yes.
Well, thank you. Enjoy.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you. Thanks to both of you.